Here's Mike Tyson's real fight with Floyd Mayweather that you've missed. Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather, two legends who defined boxing in completely different ways. Tyson, the heavyweight wrecking ball who struck fear with every punch, and Mayweather, the undefeated mastermind who turned defense into an art form. Fans thought they would never share a ring, but what if I told you they did? A real fight that most of the world missed, a night where raw power collided with flawless precision and history bent in ways nobody expected. Today, we're uncovering Mike Tyson's real fight with Floyd Mayweather, a showdown that left the boxing world stunned, but who truly came out on top? The boxing world has seen its share of dream fights that never came true, but Tyson versus Mayweather? That was always filed under impossible. Different eras, different weight classes, different legacies. Fans argued about it for years, but nobody seriously believed it could happen. Then spring 2025 arrived, and suddenly, Iron Mike at 59 years old was being announced against Floyd Mayweather, the man who built a billion-dollar brand on being untouchable. It was no fantasy anymore. The announcement shook the sport like an earthquake. On one side stood Tyson, a heavyweight wrecking ball who once ended fights in less than a minute. On the other stood Mayweather, the undefeated master of defense, 50 wins and 0 losses, the slick genius who built his legacy on never letting opponents land clean. The fight was billed not as just another exhibition, but as the ultimate clash of philosophies, raw power colliding with pure perfection. Promoters knew they had struck gold. This wasn't just two men stepping into a ring, this was a cultural collision. Tyson symbolized chaos, ferocity, and the terrifying reminder of what boxing once was. Mayweather symbolized calculation, control, and the cold precision of modern boxing. Together, they embodied the sport's past and its present, locked in a moment that blurred the lines between spectacle and history. Mike Tyson's resume wasn't just impressive, it was legendary, the kind of record that makes opponents nervous before they even step in the ring. 50 wins, 44 by knockout, 7 losses. That's not just a career, that's a reign of terror written into boxing history. Tyson wasn't your average heavyweight. He was a storm that rolled through the sport, unpredictable, violent, and impossible to ignore. And the craziest part? He didn't just become champion. He became the youngest heavyweight champion ever, snatching the crown at just 20 years old in 1986. The kid from Brooklyn, once known for trouble in the streets, had become Iron Mike, the most feared man alive. At his peak, Tyson was pure chaos in gloves. His fights weren't long chess matches. They were demolition jobs. Take Trevor Berbick, the man Tyson dismantled to claim the heavyweight title. Berbick looked like he had stepped into a tornado. He hit the canvas in ways that defied physics, wobbling like he'd been struck by lightning. Then there was Michael Spinks, a former light heavyweight and heavyweight champ who came into their fight unbeaten and confident. Tyson erased that confidence in 91 seconds. One punch after another, the crowd barely had time to sit down before Spinks was staring up at the ceiling lights. Frank Bruno, Larry Holmes, Razor Ruddock, one by one, Tyson tore through them, not just beating opponents but breaking them. What made Tyson so terrifying wasn't just power, though he had plenty of it. It was his style. He didn't lumber forward like most heavyweights. He moved like a middleweight, ducking, weaving, slipping punches, and then detonating bombs from angles his opponents never saw coming. His trainer, Cus D'Amato, had drilled him in the peekaboo style, where Tyson used relentless head movement and footwork to close distance before unleashing brutal combinations. Tyson wasn't just knocking people out, he was reprogramming what fans thought a heavyweight could do. Even Tyson found ways to stay relevant. The mid-90s saw him reclaim heavyweight titles, blasting through fighters and Bruce Seldon. But when he faced Evander Holyfield in 1996 and again in 1997, the weaknesses began to show. For many, that was the end of the story. The rise, the fall, the tragic what if. But Tyson had other plans. He rebuilt himself, not just physically but mentally. He got sober, became a successful entrepreneur, launched a podcast, acted in movies, and, perhaps most shocking, reinvented himself as a likable figure. Iron Mike went from the scariest man alive to something nobody expected, a beloved, almost wise elder statesman of the fight game. So when Tyson announced exhibition fights in his 50s, fans were curious but cautious. The Jake Paul fight in 2024 showed flashes of the old Tyson. Those hands still had violence in them, but he also looked mortal. And that raised the question, Could a man pushing 60 really still be dangerous inside the ropes? Could he still summon the destructive force that once made men crumble before the first bell even rang? The numbers said no. History said no. But Tyson's career has never been about following the script. He was the kid who came from nothing, the fighter who became champion at 20, the hurricane who destroyed entire divisions. And even at 59, stepping into the ring with Floyd Mayweather, that question hung in the air. Not if Tyson could survive, but if he could still make the world believe in Iron Mike one more time. Floyd Mayweather's boxing resume is as clean as it gets. 50 wins, 0 losses, 5 weight divisions conquered. On paper, that's perfection. He walked away from the sport undefeated with belts stacked so high they barely fit on his arms. He called himself the best ever, and in terms of pure numbers, you can't argue he wasn't one of the most successful fighters to lace up gloves. But here's the thing, success doesn't always equal fear. And when you put Mayweather next to Mike Tyson, the difference is night and day. While Tyson was a storm that blew through opponents, Mayweather was more like a chess player. His style wasn't about raw violence, it was about control. He perfected the shoulder roll defense, making opponents miss again and again, then countering with sharp, precise shots. He didn't knock people out, he outpointed them. Only 27 of his 50 wins came by knockout, and most of those were early in his career. Compare that to Tyson's 44 knockouts, many in the first round, and you start to see the gap in intimidation. Tyson's opponents showed up hoping to survive. Mayweather's showed up hoping to land a punch. Floyd built his reputation in the lighter divisions: super featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, and super welterweight. He beat names like Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, and Manny Pacquiao. Each victory polished his legacy, but they often came with caveats. Critics said he fought Pacquiao too late, after the prime years had passed. Others said he picked opponents carefully, waiting for the right moment. To Mayweather's credit, he never slipped, never lost, but that perfection sometimes came at the cost of drama. Mike Tyson, on the other hand, was pure spectacle. When Tyson fought, people didn't just watch, they braced themselves. Pay-per-view buys weren't about whether he'd win, but about how fast he'd destroy the man across from him. Floyd sold fights too, but for a different reason. His genius wasn't just in the ring, it was in marketing. He became Money Mayweather, flashing stacks of cash, draped in jewelry, walking into arenas with rappers in tow. He made himself the villain so people would pay to see him lose. The problem? He never did. So while Tyson left fans trembling with adrenaline, Floyd often left them grumbling about 12-round decision wins. So when promoters announced the fight, the reaction wasn't just excitement, it was disbelief. How do you match a heavyweight monster against a welterweight genius? Tyson walked into the ring at over 220 pounds. Mayweather made his career dancing at 147. On paper, it was absurd. But that absurdity is what made it irresistible. Fans didn't just want to see who would win, they wanted to see if Tyson's power could finally overwhelm Mayweather's perfection, or if Mayweather could somehow tame the chaos of Tyson. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Tyson was violence, unfiltered and unforgiving. He came from the streets, fought his way out of poverty, and wore his scars openly. His fights weren't contests, they were demolitions. Mayweather, on the other hand, was business. He was the scientist in the ring, the man who turned opponents into frustrated spectators. Where Tyson was fury, Floyd was finesse. Where Tyson was knockout, Floyd was decision. They were two sides of boxing's soul. That's what made the setup so powerful. It wasn't just a fight, it was a debate, settled not in words but with fists. Could decades of defensive brilliance hold up against one perfectly timed punch? Could the old lion still roar loud enough to silence the man who never lost? Tyson himself admitted he didn't see this coming. He had just come off an exhibition loss to Jake Paul in 2024, a moment many thought would be his farewell. He was candid. "I didn't expect this fight to happen, but I'm going to give everything. At my age, it's dangerous, but this is history." That honesty only fueled the hype. Fans saw a man confronting his mortality but still willing to risk it all. Mayweather, by contrast, leaned into his confidence. "My legacy is untouchable, 50-0. This is entertainment. He's too slow, too old." His arrogance was part of the package. Floyd never just fought, he sold himself as unbeatable. He knew how to make people pay to see him win and pay even more hoping to see him lose. Tyson was his perfect dance partner. That was the setup. Two legends from different worlds colliding on a stage bigger than the sport itself. On one side, the heavyweight who defined fear. On the other, the welterweight who defined perfection. Power versus precision. Chaos versus control. The question wasn't whether people would watch. The question was whether the world could handle what it was about to see. The hype machine didn't just warm up for this fight, it went nuclear. Tyson, never known for sugarcoating his words, looked straight into cameras and said, "I didn't think this fight would ever happen, but I'll hurt him bad." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And coming from Tyson, every word felt like a storm warning. Floyd's response? Pure Mayweather. He leaned back in his chair, let out that trademark laugh, and fired back. "He's too old, too slow. I'll show why I'm 50-0. He didn't even blink. That's Floyd, turning doubt into confidence, confidence into arrogance, and arrogance into pay-per-view buys. The press conferences were nothing short of explosive. Tyson carried that menace in his stare, the kind that made grown men freeze 30 years ago. Meanwhile, Mayweather strutted around in designer shades, smirking like the fight was already over. At one point, Tyson leaned across the table, fists clenched, and the whole room thought he might swing before fight night. Floyd, unfazed, sipped water and smirked harder. It was theater, but it was dangerous theater, and the clips went viral within minutes. Sports media couldn't agree on what they were even watching. Some called it the biggest circus boxing had ever produced, two legends cashing in on nostalgia. Others warned it might be the most dangerous exhibition ever staged. Tyson was almost 60. Floyd, while younger at 48, had never faced someone with Tyson's kind of power. Would Floyd dance around all night? Would Tyson's age betray him? Nobody really knew. And that uncertainty lit a fire under the whole world. By the week of the fight, it wasn't just a boxing event. It was global. TV crews from Europe, Asia, the Middle East all parked in Las Vegas. Social media melted down daily. Betting lines swung back and forth. People weren't just watching, they were arguing, fighting, declaring loyalty to their chosen legend. It was chaos, and everyone was hooked. The city turned into a living, breathing arena. Billboards lit the strip with Tyson's scowl and Floyd's grin. Celebrities packed private jets. Former champions, rappers, actors, you name it, they were there. If you weren't in Vegas that night, you wanted to be. The energy in the arena was something else. When Tyson made his entrance, it wasn't showbiz, it was primal. No music, no entourage, just that cold, silent stare and the sound of thousands of fans roaring. He looked like a gladiator walking into the Coliseum, every step heavy with history. Then came Floyd, the polar opposite. Flashy as ever, draped in jewels, rappers performing at his side, the swagger turned all the way up. He soaked in the spotlight, waving to fans like a king surveying his kingdom. The boos didn't bother him, he thrived on them. To Floyd, hate was just more fuel. Broadcasters set the tone perfectly. The fight history forgot to give us, they called it. Ali vs. Frazier, Hagler vs. Hearns, every great rivalry in boxing echoed in that moment. The tension was electric. Fans stood before the first bell even rang. This wasn't just another fight. This was history correcting itself. The clash. The bell rang and the place erupted. Round one, Floyd came out dancing, light on his toes, snapping jabs, slipping punches like he had all night to play. Tyson stormed forward, head low, swinging bombs that just barely missed their target. Floyd smiled mid-dodge like he was in control. Round two, more the same. Tyson pressed, Floyd circled. The commentator said it. This is classic Mayweather. But by rounds 3 and 4, the tone shifted. Tyson cornered him. The old predator instincts kicked in, and suddenly Floyd's back was against the ropes. Tyson ripped thunderous shots to the body, each one echoing in the arena. Floyd clinched, whispering trash talk into Tyson's ear while smirking for the cameras. Classic Floyd, taking punishment and still owning the moment. The crowd ate it up. Then came rounds 5 and 6. Floyd found his rhythm. He sharpened up, landing counter shots with surgical precision. Left hooks, straight rights. Quick snaps that opened up a cut on Tyson's face. Commentators leaned into the narrative. Floyd Mayweather is schooling Iron Mike. Fans started wondering if the age gap was finally showing, but Tyson wasn't done. By rounds 7 and 8, the atmosphere flipped again. He dug deep, ignored the blood, and pushed forward like the Tyson of old. Vicious hooks smashed into Floyd's ribs. One overhand right had Floyd stumbling for a split second, the first time in years anyone had seen him look vulnerable. The crowd lost its mind. You could feel the electricity. People were on their feet, screaming. For the first time in his career, Floyd looked human, and then round 9 came. Tyson smelled blood. He cut the ring off, drove Floyd back toward the corner, and unleashed hell. Left hook, right hand, then the shot, the uppercut. A brutal, thunderous uppercut straight out of Tyson's highlight reels from the 80s. Floyd's body lifted, his head snapped back, and he crashed to the canvas. The impossible had just happened. The arena exploded. Decades of fantasy debates had just been settled in a single punch. Tyson stood over Mayweather, gloves down, breathing heavy, eyes wild. Floyd, the man who was never supposed to lose, lay on the canvas blinking up at the lights. The referee counted. The crowd screamed each number. 7, 8, 9, 10. It was over. That knockout wasn't just a punch, it was a cultural earthquake. Tyson, at nearly 60 years old, had just toppled the man who built an empire on being untouchable. Floyd's perfect record didn't matter anymore. It wasn't on the books, sure, but in the eyes of fans, the myth of invincibility was shattered. Tyson reminded the world that sometimes raw power can bend even the sharpest defense. And as Tyson's hand was raised, you could feel it. This wasn't about stats or scorecards, it was about legacy. Tyson, the lion who refused to die quietly, had roared one last time. That's the story of the hype, the stage, and the clash. A fight nobody thought would happen, a night nobody will ever forget, and a knockout that shook the boxing world to its core. Floyd tried to get up, he really did. You could see the pride fighting against the body. He pushed his gloves into the canvas, tried to steady himself on wobbly legs, but they just weren't there for him. His legs betrayed him. The referee didn't hesitate, he waved it off. And just like that, history was made. At 59 years old, Mike Tyson had just knocked out Floyd Mayweather, the man who retired undefeated, the man who built an empire on being untouchable. Tyson had shattered the myth with one uppercut. The arena went insane. Some fans were screaming like they'd just seen a ghost. Others were crying, literal tears rolling down their faces. Strangers were hugging each other, jumping up and down, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Celebrities in the front row were on their feet, hands on their heads in disbelief. The sound inside that building wasn't just noise. It was a roar, a primal eruption, the kind of sound you only hear when something impossible suddenly becomes real. And in the middle of it all stood Tyson. Breathing heavy, gloves down, sweat and blood mixing on his face, but his eyes? They burned like it was 1988 all over again. He grabbed the mic, his voice cracking with emotion, and said, "I told you, I'm still dangerous." It wasn't bravado, it was truth. At nearly 60 years old, Iron Mike had resurrected his legend in front of the entire world. Like this video and subscribe to the channel to get more updates.